No one stood beside her when her name was spoken. That was the first cruelty. Alara stood at the far edge of the great royal hall, her hands folded protectively over her stomach, her shoulders straight despite the weight pressing down on her from every direction. Chandeliers of black crystal glowed overhead, casting cold light across marble floors, polished by centuries of power, but none of that light touched her. The nobles formed a careful distance around her, as if disgrace were contagious, as if the shame they believed she carried could stain their silk gowns and jeweled rings simply by proximity. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps. A fallen woman, unclaimed, pregnant, no name for the father, no honor left to defend. Alara had once belonged to a respected household. Once, her laughter had been welcome in these halls. Once, servants bowed to her and relatives spoke her name with pride. That life had vanished the moment her condition became visible. The moment people realized she carried a child no man would publicly claim. Her family had turned their faces away first. Then came the quiet removal of privileges, the relocation to a distant wing, the servants instructed not to linger, not to ask questions, not to show kindness. Kindness, Alara learned, was reserved only for those society deemed worthy. The summons to the royal gathering had not been an invitation. It had been a sentence. Tonight, she was here so the court could see her, judge her, use her as a lesson. The nobles needed a spectacle, and Alara had been chosen to play the role of warning. She felt it in the way their eyes lingered on her stomach, not with curiosity, but with contempt. She felt it in the way conversation stopped when she moved, in the way laughter resumed only after she passed. Still, she lifted her chin. If they would strip her of dignity, she would not surrender it willingly. At the center of the hall, voices rose as the council called for attention. Alara knew what would come next. The questions, the accusations disguised as concern. She had rehearsed her silence, practiced breathing through humiliation, prepared herself to endure whatever cruelty awaited her. What she had not prepared for was the way. The air itself seemed to shift. It happened without announcement. A presence entered the hall, cold and absolute, like nightfall made flesh. Conversations fractured. Nobles stiffened. Fear replaced mockery with startling speed. Alara did not need to turn to know who had arrived. Everyone knew when the vampire king walked among them. King Valeric Nightborn had ruled longer than most kingdoms had existed. Ancient, unchallenged, his name alone silenced rebellions and ended bloodlines. He did not attend human gatherings often, and when he did, it was never without reason. His silver hair caught the candlelight as he moved through the crowd, red eyes unreadable, his expression carved from restraint. Power followed him like a living thing, bending the room around his presence. Alara felt him before she saw him. Her pulse stuttered, her breath caught. Something deep within her stirred with unfamiliar awareness, a sense that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition she did not understand. She remained still, staring ahead, refusing to turn, even as he stopped behind her. The council speaker cleared his throat, clearly unnerved. "Lady Alara," he began, his voice echoing across the hall, "you stand accused of dishonoring your house. You are with child, yet no husband stands beside you. This court demands to know, who is the father?" The silence that followed was merciless. ELA single quotes as fingers tightened over her abdomen. She felt the child move faintly beneath her palm, a reminder of the innocent life depending entirely on her strength. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. What answer would satisfy them? The truth would be dismissed. Her pain would be mocked. Her voice would be torn apart and reshaped into scandal. A cruel laugh rose from somewhere behind her. "Perhaps she doesn't know," someone said loudly. Or perhaps there were too many to count. Heat burned behind Ilara's eyes, but she did not cry. She would not give them that victory. Before the council could press further, a voice cut through the hall low, controlled, and impossibly calm. That will be enough. Every head turned. King Valeric stepped forward, his presence commanding instant obedience. He did not look at the council. He did not look at the nobles. His gaze fixed solely on Ilara. Slowly, deliberately, he placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was unmistakable, protective, possessive, final. The hall froze. "The child," the Vampire King said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "is under my protection." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Valeric did not stop there. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Ilara could hear, his words brushing against her ear like a dangerous secret. "Pretend," he whispered. "That baby is mine." Ilara's world tilted. She did not understand his motives. She did not know why the most feared being in the realm would offer her salvation, wrapped in a lie powerful enough to shatter kingdoms. All she knew was that in that moment, the woman everyone had rejected was no longer alone, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hall did not recover quickly from the Vampire King's words. Silence held for several long heartbeats after he spoke, thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves were struggling to accept what had just been declared. Ilara stood frozen beneath King Valeric's hand, her mind unable to catch up with reality. The warmth of his touch was unexpected, not cold as the legends claimed, but steady and grounding. Around them, nobles stared openly now, shock stripping away their carefully practiced masks of superiority. Some looked afraid. Others looked outraged. None dared to speak. Lord Halvern, the council's loudest voice only moments before, swallowed hard before forcing a brittle smile. "Your Majesty," he said cautiously, "surely there is some misunderstanding. This woman, she is human, unwed. Her reputation is irrelevant," Valeric interrupted calmly. His voice was not raised, yet it carried absolute authority. "She stands under my protection. That is the only truth this court requires." His fingers tightened slightly on Ilara's shoulder, a silent reassurance meant only for her. She felt her knees weaken, but she remained standing, drawing strength from the presence beside her. Whispers erupted again, but this time they were edged with fear instead of cruelty. A vampire king claiming a human child was not merely scandalous. It was dangerous. Such unions were forbidden, whispered about only in old prophecies and blood-stained histories. Ilara felt the weight of those whispers settle on her like a cloak she had never asked to wear. She wanted to speak, to ask him why, to tell him he was mistaken, but her voice refused to obey her. Valeric guided her away from the center of the hall, ignoring the council's stunned expressions. The crowd parted instinctively, no one daring to block their path. Ilara walked beside him as if in a dream, her senses dulled by shock. She did not realize they had reached a private chamber until the heavy doors closed behind them, sealing out the noise and judgment of the court. Only then did Valeric remove his hand. Ilara turned to face him at last. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. His red eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and strangely seen. She took a shaky breath. "Your Majesty," she began, then stopped. What words could possibly follow? Gratitude felt too small. Fear felt too obvious. Why? Was all she managed to ask. Rick was silent for a long moment. He moved toward the tall window, looking out at the night sky as if searching for answers written in the stars. "Because they would have destroyed you," he said finally, "and because your child did not deserve to be born condemned." He turned back to her, his expression controlled but not unkind. The lie was necessary. Ilara's hands trembled as she rested them on her stomach. But it isn't true, she whispered. The child is not yours. When they discover, they will not, Valeric said firmly. Not unless I allow it. His gaze softened slightly. You will remain under my protection. You will be treated with respect. Anyone who questions your place will answer to me. Tears finally spilled down Ilara's cheeks, silent and unstoppable. Not from shame, but from relief so overwhelming it bordered on pain. For months she had carried her fear alone, bracing herself against rejection after rejection. Now, the most powerful being in the realm had placed himself between her and the world. I don't understand, she admitted. You owe me nothing. Valeric's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That may not be entirely true, he said quietly, though he did not explain further. Instead, he summoned a guard and issued swift, precise orders. Ilara would be moved to protected quarters within the Night Palace. No one would approach her without permission. Physicians loyal to the crown would attend to her needs. The guard bowed deeply, eyes flicking toward Ilara with new respect before departing. When they were alone again, Ilara felt exhaustion crash over her. This lie, she said hesitantly, it will change everything for you. Your counsel. Your enemies. I am well acquainted with enemies, Valeric replied. They already test my rule. This changes very little for me. After a pause, he added, For you, it changes everything. She studied him, trying to reconcile the feared vampire king with the man standing before her. What do you want from me in return? Nothing, he said immediately. Then, more slowly, only that you remain strong. For the child, and for yourself. Ilara nodded, unsure whether she believed him, but too tired to question further. As attendants arrived to escort her to her new chambers, she glanced back at him one last time. Thank you, she said softly. Valeric inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than dismissal. As the doors closed behind her, he remained where he was, staring at the space she had occupied. The scent of her lingered faintly in the room, unfamiliar and unsettling. He told himself the lie was political, necessary, temporary. Yet as he turned back toward the darkened hall, one truth settled heavily in his chest dot by claiming her child. He had bound himself to her fate, and the consequences of that choice had only just begun. Asterisk. The Night Palace was nothing like the places Ilara had known before. Its halls were carved from dark stone that shimmered faintly under torchlight, as if the walls themselves breathed with ancient magic. Servants moved quietly, respectfully, never staring, never whispering. For the first time in months, Ilara was not looked at with judgment. Yet safety did not erase her fear. Each step deeper into the palace reminded her that she was now living, inside a lie powerful enough to change the fate of kingdoms. Her chambers overlooked a moonlit garden where silver-leafed trees swayed in the night wind. Physicians came daily, gentle and professional, treating her condition as something precious rather than shameful. Guards stood outside her door at all hours, not as prison keepers, but as protectors. Still, Ilara slept poorly. She woke often from dreams of angry crowds, of voices shouting lies and truths tangled together, of a tall shadow watching her from afar with eyes like burning embers. That shadow was never far from her thoughts. King Valeric did not visit her often at first. When he did, it was brief and formal. He asked about her health, the child, her comfort. He listened more than he spoke. Ilara noticed how carefully he kept his distance, as if afraid a single step closer might cross a line neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Yet his presence changed the air in the room every time he entered. The fear she felt around him slowly shifted into something quieter, heavier, and far more confusing dot beyond her chambers. The palace simmered with unrest. The vampire council did not accept the king's declaration easily. Ancient lords gathered in shadowed halls, their voices sharp with suspicion. A human woman bearing acclaimed heir-threatened traditions older than memory. Some whispered of manipulation, others of prophecy. A few dared to suggest weakness. Veilric listened to them all in silence, his expression unreadable, his patience wearing thinner with every accusation. She could be lying, one lord said boldly. Humans are fragile, easily corrupted. Then you underestimate her, Veilric replied coldly. And you forget your place. Still, doubt spread like poison. Rumors reached Alara despite the guard's best efforts. She heard that some nobles questioned the child's blood, that others feared what it might become. The word monster was whispered more than once. Each rumor struck deeper than the last, and Alara found herself shrinking inward again, the old fear clawing its way back. One evening, unable to bear the silence of her chambers any longer, Alara wandered into the garden. The moon was high, bathing everything in pale silver. She rested her hands on her stomach, breathing slowly, reminding herself she was no longer alone. That was when she sensed him. Veilric stood near the edge of the garden, motionless, as if he had been carved from stone. "You should not be outside unguarded," he said without turning. "I needed air," Alara replied softly. "And quiet." He turned then, studying her carefully. "You are troubled." "I hear things," she admitted. "About the child. About me. About you." She hesitated, and forced herself to continue. "If this lie costs you your throne, I could leave." "I never asked for." "You will not leave," Veilric said sharply, then paused. His tone softened. "And this is not your burden to carry alone." Alara looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time saw the exhaustion beneath his control. "Why does this matter so much to you?" she asked. "You could have let them ruin me. No one would have blamed you." Veilric's gaze drifted to her stomach. "Because I know what it is to be judged before you draw your first breath," he said quietly. "And because I once failed to protect someone who stood alone." The confession hung between them, fragile and unfinished. Alara felt something shift inside her, a thread of understanding weaving itself between them. Without thinking, she placed a hand over his arm. He stiffened at first, then did not pull away. "You didn't fail me," she said gently. "You saved me." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. No king, no disgraced woman. Just two souls bound by circumstance and choice. Veilric stepped back first, breaking the moment. "You should rest," he said. "The nights are growing dangerous." As he left, Alara realized something terrifying and hopeful all at once. The man who had claimed her child as a lie was beginning to care in ways no lie could contain got and deep within the palace. Forces older and darker than either of them were watching, waiting to see whether that fragile bond would break or reshape the world. Asterisk, the first real attack did not come with blood or blades. It came with silence. Alara noticed it in the way servants hesitated before speaking, in the way guards outside her chambers doubled overnight, in the way the palace itself seemed to hold its breath. The night palace had always been quiet, but now the quiet felt sharp, deliberate, as if something unseen was circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. Alara felt it most when she was alone, when her hands rested on her stomach and the child shifted gently beneath her skin. Unaware of the danger gathering beyond stone walls, the council had stopped arguing openly. That worried Veilric more than rebellion ever could. Ancient enemies revealed themselves loudly. True threats learned patience. Reports reached him: daily noble houses withdrawing support, border clans refusing tribute, whispers that the king had been weakened by sentiment. Some lords demanded proof of the child's blood. Others spoke of old laws written to prevent exactly this kind of union. Veilric listened, expression carved from ice, but inside something burned. Not fear for his throne, fear for Alara. When he finally summoned her to meet him in the inner council chamber, Alara sensed the gravity of the moment before a single word was spoken. The chamber was circular, its walls etched with runes older than kingdoms. A single flame burned at the center, blue and steady. Valeric stood beside it, hands clasped behind his back. "They are planning something," he said without preamble. Alara swallowed. "The council?" "And those beyond it," he replied. "They want to test the lie." Her heart tightened. "How?" "A blood rite," Valeric said. "An ancient one. They will demand the child be examined once it is born. Publicly." Alara's breath caught. "That would expose everything." "Yes," he said simply. "Which is why they believe it will force me to abandon you." Silence fell between them, heavy and terrifying. Alara's first instinct was the same one that had guided her all her life: to remove herself, to become smaller, to stop being the problem. "Then I should go," she said quietly. "Before it comes to that." Valeric turned sharply. "No, you cannot risk war for me," she pressed, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay calm. "I've already taken too much from you." "You have taken nothing," he said, stepping closer. "This threat exists because of me, because of my choice." Alara looked up at him, eyes shining. "Then let me make one too." He hesitated just for a moment. "Speak." "I will stand," she said. "I will not hide. I will not run. If they wish to judge me, let them. I have lived with their hatred already. I survived it once. I can survive it again." Valeric studied her as if seeing her for the first time. Not as a fragile human he needed to shield, but as a woman who had endured more than most immortals ever would. "You should not have to be brave again," he said softly. "But I am," she replied. "That night, the palace was attacked, that it was subtle at first. A servant poisoned. A corridor room shattered, shadows moving where no shadows should exist. Then it became unmistakable. An assassin breached the inner defenses, slipping through magic meant to stop armies. Valeric sensed it instantly. He moved faster than thought, tearing through corridors in a blur of darkness and fury. Alara woke to shouting. Before she could rise, the doors to her chamber burst open. A masked figure lunged toward her, blade glinting in the low light. Alara had no time to scream. Instinct took over. She turned, shielding her stomach with her body, bracing for pain. It never came. The assassin was ripped backward, lifted off the ground by invisible force. Valeric stood in the doorway, eyes blazing crimson, his control finally shattered. He did not speak. He did not need to. Power filled the room, ancient and terrible. The assassin tried to beg. The words never formed. When it was over, the body lay still at Valeric's feet. Alara stared at him, shaking. Not in fear of him, but in awe of what he had done without hesitation. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt before her, hands gentle as they cupped her face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "You came." "I will always come," he said, the promise raw and unguarded. In that moment, the lie ended for him. Later, as dawn threatened the night sky, Valeric stood before the council. The assassin's seal lay broken at his feet, proof of treachery from within their own ranks. His voice carried deathly calm. "Any who threaten her threaten me," he said. "Any who challenge her child challenge my crown." No one spoke. From that night on, Alara was no longer merely protected. She was defended. And Valeric Nightborn, feared ruler of the night, finally understood the truth he could no longer deny. This was no longer a lie meant to save a woman. It was a bond he would kill to protect. Asterisk. The truth hidden in blood and choice after the failed assassination. The night palace changed its rhythm. Fear no longer whispered behind closed doors. It retreated, wounded but watching. Guards were replaced, loyalties examined, ancient wards reforged with spells few still remembered. Alara felt the difference immediately. No longer was she merely escorted or observed. She was treated as something sacred. Servants bowed with genuine respect. Even the air around her felt steadier, as if the palace itself had accepted her presence. Yet peace brought its own kind of terror, because with every passing day, the truth pressed closer to the surface. Alara's body began to change in ways no healer could explain. Her strength did not fade as her pregnancy advanced. Instead, it grew. She no longer tired easily. Her senses sharpened. At times, she could feel the heartbeat of the palace itself, the low thrum of ancient magic pulsing through stone and shadow. The physicians whispered among themselves, carefully choosing their words when speaking to her. This is not typical. One finally admitted Elara did not need their confirmation. She felt it every time the child moved, not as a burden, but as a presence. Calm, aware, watching. She told no one at first, not even Veilric. But he noticed one evening, as she walked the moonlit gallery overlooking the lower city, he joined her without announcement. "You are changing," he said quietly. Alara stopped. "So are you." He allowed a faint smile. "Perhaps." Then his gaze sharpened. "Tell me the truth." Her hands settled instinctively over her stomach. "The child is different," she said. "I can feel it. And I think you already know why." Veilric's expression darkened, memories stirring. The night of the masquerade. The wine. The lost hours. The fragments of warmth and silver fog. The truth he had buried beneath duty and denial. "The child is mine," he said slowly. "Not as a claim, as a realization." Alara nodded. "I didn't know for certain until recently. But now I feel it. In my blood." Silence stretched between them, fragile and immense. Prophecies stirred in Veilric's mind. Words he had hoped were lies. A child of shadow and flesh, of death and breath. He exhaled slowly. "If the council learns this, they will fear it," Alara said, "or try to control it." Veilric turned toward her, his voice low. "And you?" She met his gaze without flinching. "I will protect my child, no matter the cost." Something in him shifted then, something long dormant. "So will I." The final confrontation came sooner than expected. The council demanded an audience at dawn, citing unrest across the realm. Rumors had spread beyond the palace now, reaching vampire clans and human kingdoms alike. Some called the unborn child a miracle. Others called it a curse. The council wanted an answer, a declaration that would stabilize the realm. Veilric stood before them in full regalia, Alara at his side. No longer hidden, no longer silent. "The child lives," Veilric announced. "And it is mine." Gasps erupted. Rage followed. Accusations flew like blades. Laws were cited. Warnings issued. Alara listened calmly, her fear replaced by clarity. When the council demanded proof, she stepped forward before Veilric could stop her. "You fear what you do not understand," she said simply. "But you forget something. This child is not your weapon, not your prophecy, not your monster. This child is loved." Her words rippled through the chamber, not as magic, but as truth. Then the magic answered anyway. The runes etched into the chamber walls flared with soft golden light. Not red, not dark, golden. The council fell silent as the ancient wards responded to Alara's presence, recognizing something older than law, older than fear. "The blood chooses," whispered one ancient lord, awe breaking through centuries of arrogance. Valeric took Alara's hand, openly now. "This realm will not be ruled by terror," he said, "nor by tradition that crushes the innocent. If my crown cannot protect my family, then it deserves to fall." No one challenged him. That night, beneath a sky burning with unfamiliar stars, Alara and Valeric stood together on the palace balcony. "I never wanted power," Alara admitted. "Neither did I," Valeric replied. "But perhaps that is why it chose us." She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" He brushed his thumb across her hand, a gesture intimate and reverent. "Now we stop pretending." The night Alara went into labor. The sky changed. Clouds gathered without wind. Stars dimmed, then brightened, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Across the realm, vampires paused mid-step, sensing something ancient awakening. Human cities fell unnaturally quiet. Bells rang in distant temples, without human hands to pull them. The world knew before anyone announced it that an heir of two worlds was being born. Alara did not scream. She endured the pain with a calm strength that surprised even herself, gripping the silk sheets as waves of agony tore through her body. Valeric never left her side. He ignored protocol, tradition, and the council's insistence that a king should not witness such things. He held her hand, steady and unwavering, whispering encouragement with a voice that had once commanded armies and now belonged only to her. "You are not alone," he said again and again. "I am here." When the child finally cried, the sound was not loud, but it was powerful. The runes carved into the palace walls glowed gold once more, brighter than before. The physicians froze in awe as the infant was placed in Alara's arms. The child's eyes opened briefly, one deep crimson, the other warm human brown, before closing. Again, in peaceful sleep, no one spoke, no one dared. Valeric knelt beside Alara, his composure finally breaking as he looked at his child. Not a weapon, not a prophecy, just life, innocent and small and impossibly precious. He bowed his head, not as a king, but as a father. Word spread faster than fear ever had. Some expected chaos, rebellion, bloodshed. Instead, something unexpected happened. The clans did not rise in violence. They waited. They watched. And slowly, one by one, they approached the night palace, not with demands, but with offerings. Old enemies lowered their banners. Human envoys crossed borders they had once feared. They did not come because of power. They came because the world had seen something rare. A king who chose compassion over tradition. A woman who refused to be broken by shame. A child born not from conquest, but from courage. The council convened one final time. This time, Alara stood beside Valeric, not as a protected guest, but as his equal. No one questioned her place. No one questioned the child's legitimacy. The old laws were read aloud, then quietly set aside. "The crown does not decide the future," Valeric declared. "The choices we make do." He placed a simple circlet in Alara's hands. Not the heavy crown of conquest, but a symbol of shared rule. "Stand with me," he said. "Not because of fate, because you choose to." Alara looked at the court that had once rejected her, at the throne that had once terrified her, then down at the child sleeping peacefully against her chest. She lifted her chin. "I choose." She said that the realm changed after that, not in a single moment, but in thousands of small ones. Laws were rewritten. Protection replaced punishment. The weak were no longer invisible. Stories spread of a queen who listened, who remembered what it was to be powerless, and a king whose strength was measured not by fear, but by restraint. And the child grew not into a monster, not into a tyrant, but into a bridge between worlds. Years later, when songs were sung of the Night King and his human queen, They never began with crowns or battles. They always began the same way. With a woman, everyone rejected Dot with a baby. No one would claim Dot, and with a whisper that changed everything. Pretend that baby is mine. What the world never understood was this. It had never been a lie.